Hello, I'm Maciej, Mikos, and you're watching World Talks. EU leaders have gathered in Brussels to discuss mainly further help for Ukraine and the use of Russian frozen assets. Will they reach an agreement and provide the war-torn country with the Kremlin's money? To talk about the last European Council this year, we're joined by Velina Tchakarova, founder of The Face, a geopolitical consultancy. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for accepting it. Antonio Costa, President of the European Council, stated before the summit that he would not let the participants leave until an agreement on Russia's frozen assets is reached. Now, do you think that he will deliver on his promise?
Honestly speaking, hard to tell. Nobody can really tell how exactly the outcome of this final summit in December 2025 will look like. Of course, ideally, we would like to hope that the outcome will be positive. That means that there will be some sort of an agreement which will remove the blockade by Belgium. Belgium is currently blocking the use of Euroclear assets. And the European Union, together with the member states, are trying to convince Belgium to basically agree on this collective decision. So ideal outcome will be, of course, a compromise, but a realistic outcome will actually be kind of alternative solution to the one that they are trying to come up right now, namely to use the frozen Russian assets.
Mm-hmm. Can the majority of EU countries somehow bypass the Belgian veto on the matter?
Well, that's the whole point that's being discussed right now, to actually use a majority principle instead of the anonymous principle of taking decisions within the Council. So the one, speculation is that if there is no compromise on behalf of Belgium, that this majority principle would be launched, and basically they will come up with this decision to still use the frozen Russian assets. But I have no idea how this is exactly possible, technically speaking. So second, maybe more realistic option is, as I said, to try to avoid this strategic blockade, because right now this is also about the strategic signaling when it comes to not just negotiations, but actually the continuous support for Ukraine for the next at least 2 to 3 years, given that the United States have more or less withdrawn their aid for Ukraine as a matter of pressure for Ukraine to concede during the negotiation process. So here, an alternative option would be, as I said, to try to actually gather the 200 billion in terms of a compromise. One compromise would be to initiate a collective risk responsibility, because the major obstacle from Belgian perspective is that the whole risk sits with Belgium, whereas basically, and it is not just about the Russian response, of course. I mean, we know for a fact that the Russian threats were already quite explicit, but it's actually about the risk when it comes to hosting the Euroclear, and also when it comes to the international signaling in the future. So here, I think that alternative, let's say, option would be for all European Union members to somehow split the risk in terms of a concrete financial commitment, which will be more or less disseminated proportionally among the member states.
And this is something that some member states oppose, and quite strongly. Now, former Slovakian foreign minister told me today that his country will eventually agree to use Russia's frozen assets. But what about Hungary?
Yes, so you see right now the problem is multifold. We are currently dealing, as we are discussing this issue, with only one matter of a series of strategically important issues. Think of the strategic decision on the complete withdrawal from Russian gas, both LNG and pipeline in the next 2 years. And again, if you take a look at the way how the decision was taken by using the majority principle, again, without an anonymous principle, which countries were the ones that were against it? Of course, it was Hungary and Slovakia. So here we have another important issue. And of course, the obstacles, once again, are coming from the usual suspects. Why? Because they're also using the narrative right now that, okay, on a matter which was strategically important for a Hungarian or Slovakian interest, when it comes to the disproportional dissemination of risk and cost, which is a fact, because, as we know, the share of dependence is a very different one within the member states. Here again, we have this issue of a disproportionate risk dispersion among the member states. And again, countries like Hungary are using the occasion for the matter of their own national interest.
Now, Ukrainians claim that they have no more than a few months, like mid-spring, until they will have to cut down the military expenses. It's mostly about air defense. Now, this will result, obviously, in more civilian casualties. So far, we're talking about money, but I'm wondering whether European decision makers are forgetting about what is actually happening right now in Ukraine.
They are to a certain extent, because again, it's all about skin in the game. And right now we know for a fact that the only country with skin in the game when it comes to the conventional war of Russia is Ukraine, with its own army, which is fighting every day, with its civilian population, which is facing these most severe attacks from the air, by drones, by missiles, and so on and so forth. And I think that when you put it from this perspective, you clearly see that national interests in each one of these individual member states, but also particular interests within the political and institutional class in Europe, are overshadowing the collective interest of Europeans. What is the collective interest? That right now, the most credible security guarantee that Europeans, I mean citizens, I mean political decision makers and institutional ones, bureaucrats, are having is actually the protection that they are receiving from the Ukrainian army every single day, because the Ukrainian army is the one fighting against the Russian attacks, the conventional ones. So in that sense, to put it simply, and to answer your question in the most simple way, I don't think that there is this sense of urgency in the capitals and also in the capital of the European Union, Brussels, when it comes to the severe consequences of the lack of unity and the lack of strategic vision within Europe. Let's leave the Americans aside. I mean, this would be the European responsibility. This will be a perfect occasion to show actually that the Europeans are capable of taking responsibility, even if it's in the financial matter, but they are not actually proving the point. In fact, they are proving exactly the point of the Americans, that Europe is weak and that Europe is actually responsible when it comes to the European security and defense.
Now, apart from Ukraine, which absolutely tops the agenda of the last European Council this year, Europe's leaders are also expected to debate the bloc's enlargement. So I'm wondering here who's closest to joining the bloc and who has fallen out of the EU's favour.
Again, I have no simple answer for you, unfortunately. So, on all critically important questions, on all strategic matters, I don't see this sense for urgency. Respectfully, the sense of actually of unity. So in that context, again, I have no big expectations. I mean,
Right.
I can, of course, normatively highlight what's important to be done. I can give you very, very important strategic recommendations, what will be necessary to be done on behalf of the Europeans, but that's not the matter because at the end of the day, we are facing the consequences of the decisions or the lack of such by our European.
No, because here we're going back to Ukraine, as a matter of fact. I'm wondering whether recent corruption scandals in Ukraine have somehow slowed down the country's progress in EU negotiations, or, quite contrary, is Europe ready to let Ukraine in to protect it from Russia?
Well, the corruption cases can be interpreted in various ways, depending again on the context. We can interpret them as actually as a matter of progress that these agencies that were actually launched to tackle exactly these issues. As a matter of fact, this is part also of the enlargement project process and the enlargement commitments. So in that sense, we can argue that this is actually something positive in the sense that they are exposing these structural issues of corruption. Now, there are, of course, counter voices that were actually exposing these issues as a matter of failure, right? In fact, some analysts were even using the case of corruption as something that would be favorable to the American position, which is a position of pressure right now for Ukraine to concede so that there would be a political agreement. So in that sense, I don't think actually that the corruption cases will be an obstacle to the enlargement of Ukraine, because in the end, the enlargement of Ukraine, that means the European enlargement, will be a geopolitical decision first and foremost, and not a technical or institutional one.
Velina Tchakarova, founder of FA's geopolitical consultancy, was our guest this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews here on TVP World.